All right. Welcome, Fiends, to Handle with Scare, presented by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Our show discusses horror movies and the phobias they emphasize. With me tonight, as always, to cap off Botanophobia and the fear of plants, are my co-hosts, Holly, Hooch, and John. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
We're doing good.
Good,
Hi, T.
good.
Oh, check out our new space. We moved into the mansion.
We're in the Munsters mansion.
You know, you were looking forward to it so much that you decided to move in. Mockingbird Lane will never be the same again at that point.
Yeah, I was getting bored of the beige wall. I don't know. This feels better. I mean, Joe really likes it. He wants to keep it up all just as a regular decoration. So.
Oh.
Yeah, it's even bigger. You can't see the whole thing.
It's ginormous.
There's a whole entryway with stairs and paintings and everything.
Tilt it back a little bit. Whoa!
No, it keeps going. Yeah, the only thing missing are like the stairs that lead to nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the Winchester Mystery House.
You know, they're letting people sleep in there now?
Mm.
Should do that sometime.
Nice. Don't worry.
Yeah, sure, why not? But yeah, so obviously we're here to wrap up Botanophobia. Last week we had talked about the 2021 eco horror release, Gaia, aka basically like The Last of Us, but in movie form.
Fantastic movie.
Which was criminally overlooked, and it was the first time watching for you guys, so always good to like sprinkle in some new stuff for you. So as a podcast, we've all kind of been discussing like, okay, well, what do we want to do for October? I mean, we're smack dab in the middle of spooky season, and we were compiling the list of like stuff that's on our radar, things that are coming out here in the coming weeks, and the fact of the matter is, October just has way too much shit going on. Like, there are so many, like, major titles, whether it's TV series, whether it's theater releases, whether it's straight to streaming services releases, that we're basically going to be doing 9 weeks of newer content that is being released here throughout October and into November. And then, of course, we'll circle back to holiday movies for December, and then come January we come for a circle back to the phobia stuff. But just a lot of stuff happening in a short span, and we really wanted to have enough time to like really breathe and like celebrate all of these new releases. And I know like there's just so many titles that we were all looking forward to, so that's the plan for the upcoming months. But tonight we're here to talk about William Friedkin's The Guardian. And I remember when we were mentioning this movie, I'm like, I don't think I've seen this movie, and I absolutely have not after watching it. I will say, out of the movies that I watched on Tuesday, which was The Munsters, the new Rob Zombie movie. I watched The Majorettes, which was a newer 80s movie that I had never seen, which was a slasher that failed not only in the blood department because it was fairly bloodless. It also didn't really have that many like slasher kills in it. And then it took like this really weird pivot where it's like, okay, we're gonna like go in a different direction and become like an action thriller. And then it was like a big gunfight, and then it was just really confusing. So I basically got a slasher that had more gun kills than actual like knife kills, which was really bizarre. So yeah, and then and then I saw The Guardian, and I was like, okay, like this movie was actually pretty entertaining. And it plays up some really on the nose tropes in regards to the hot nanny.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into that, of course. But John, I'm pretty sure like you were the one who brought this one up. So was this like a first time? Yeah, I mean, in a good way.
Well, I came across this one the same way I came across the Clowns at Midnight movie.
Also delicious.
Which was basically just kind of Googling around a bit and looking for stuff, random stuff.
I actually really enjoyed, and I enjoyed this movie, and I enjoyed The Clowns at Midnight as well. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Go on.
But I don't remember exactly. I think Googling for plant horror movies, or I think was my search phrase, and it came up, and I saw the director's name and the name of the movie, and I was
wait a minute.
And there were these kind of rash of weird, kind of failed horror movies that came out in the 90s around this time. There's one, I think it's called The Hidden or something like that, and it's about a spirit. There's a later movie too, but this is about a spirit that could like jump from person to person, and it was like a serial killer. I think Jeff Goldblum might be in it, but it's a weirdly kind of similar like 90s horror movie that kind of doesn't know whether it wants to be a horror movie or a thriller kind of thing. And it was also the thing of, as we all kind of like have all watched famous movies, and even not even famous, I shouldn't even say famous, but in the horror, like you feel like you've seen or at least heard of everything, especially stuff made by the bigger directors and filmmakers. But this one was, felt like a lost movie in a way, because it was so obscure and I'd never heard of it.
And it also, the production quality has, I feel like a lot of the 90s movies had this sort of weird production quality to them where they kind of seem like made for TV a little bit, not quite. And this movie definitely had that sort of feel to it where like not a lot of money went into it doesn't feel that expensive. But I will say that I did enjoy the movie, and but yeah, I hadn't heard of it before. But every complaint that I've had about every single movie this month, this movie delivered on. I actually got to see some literal plant violence.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing is too is that stumbling across this movie, of course, the first thing I did was look at the trailer on YouTube, which makes the movie look terrible. Like, I don't know if you guys watched the official preview for the movie, but it looked like, when I watched a preview, I was like, we should probably watch this because it looks bonkers and it looks like absolutely terrible, but it looks like one of those kind of spectacular failures that's fun and interesting to watch, Yes. But, which is the surprising thing, though, because, and we'll obviously get into it more later, but the movie is a lot better. The trailer makes it look terrible, but the movie's actually a lot better than the trailer makes it look.
Right, and the movie is the movie is two different movies. You've got like the whole like fatal attraction thing going on one half of the movie, and then you got the really fun horror part of the movie on the other side. And I remember just as I was reaching for my phone out of boredom, that's when the tree violence started, and it really saved it.
Well, and I wanted to also quickly talk about, because, it's William Friedkin, I'm not sure how he pronounces his name, but obviously most famous, the director for Exorcist is what he's most well known for. And maybe to a less,
nuts.
and I feel like also The Exorcist 3 is kind of finally getting its due, and people are kind of recognizing it for the good movie that it actually is.
Is that with the guy in the insane asylum?
Mm-hmm.
Damn, that's
with Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif as the serial killer that's possessed by the demon. And so, to see this kind of crazy movie I'd never heard of that was directed and also is credited as being written by him, or at least partly written by him. Okay. I was like, what, is this? What's going on? And so I checked the Wikipedia, and so turns out that this movie was, it was a script written by this guy, I can't remember his name, and it was intended to be Sam Raimi's big Hollywood movie, his first Hollywood movie after Evil Dead 2.
Because of the tree rape and,
I know. Well, that's the weird thing, though, actually. But so he was involved to be the director, but apparently the pre-production was so kind of crazy and messed up that he ended up walking away from it and not doing it. And then they brought in William Friedkin to have him do it. And he apparently, so this story is based on an existing book or story that is just a thriller. There's no supernatural element.
Oh, okay.
And they figured since he's directing the movie now, they wanted to bring in a supernatural element because of The Exorcist, and so they demanded he insert.
Demanded.
And so they added in the part about the nanny being basically like a dryad tree nymph.
Dryad nymph. It's a good name. She was hot.
And kind of added that element to the movie.
Wait, so the movie beforehand was just about a crazy nanny? No trees?
Yeah. I think, as you mentioned, what do you call it, with Glenn Close?
Yeah, Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. It seems like this was intended to kind of be a Fatal Attraction type of movie originally.
That's bonkers.
Which I think came out, I bet if we look, probably came out before this movie, I would think. Fatal Attraction, probably late 80s.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think so. Yeah, that feels about right.
Oh.
What year did this movie come out?
1990.
Same year as The Exorcist 3.
Oh.
How close to Exorcist 3?
Oh, it was the same year.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Maybe he just was really focused on that other movie.
But so just to kind of wrap up the backstory, the studio wanted one thing and the director wanted another thing. And they were apparently they were putting so much pressure and making the writer do so many rewrites that he had a nervous breakdown and had to leave the project. And then the director ended up writing the end of the movie basically because they had to kind of add in the supernatural, like mythological kind of element.
I can see why the writer went crazy. That's really nuts.
The movie definitely has that kind of disjointed feel to it where you can tell.
But there's some really solid acting in it too, which was really interesting. So you mentioned, and it was actually not the same actress I thought you were talking about. So the actress from Law and Order with the short brown hair with the blue eyes, the one I was thinking about was the one with the brown eyes. Anyway, there's also the guy from, I don't know any of their fucking names, but there's that fairly famous actor who was one of the friends. He's not even in that movie that much. He's wearing the glasses.
Yeah. The guy from RoboCop?
Yeah. And it's nuts how many different kind of faces I recognized. And overall, I thought the acting was very solid. I mean, within reason.
I think the movie starts strong. It feels like... Well, first of all, I have to also call out that the opening credits, they use the same font as The Exorcist. And which was kind of shady, because they're just like, oh...
Just trying to get everybody excited about it, huh?
But yeah, I watched the first 20 minutes of the movie and then on one day, and then a couple of days later I watched the second half. And watching the first 20 or 30 minutes, I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy that this movie is so kind of under the radar and gets so much negative.
Yeah.
It's that it was kind of written off as this horrible movie, because this is actually pretty good. And it's kind of it's weirdly what people are being hard on it.
Is it 20 minutes before the three guys get killed?
I think it's before, but it feels like a real movie.
Yeah, it's like a real movie.
At first. You feel like you're going to get this, it feels like it even has that feel of kind of The Exorcist. You can tell that it's made by the same person, But
yeah, that's pretty good. What's your take, T?
Yeah, it feels like a real movie in the sense that, you have this nanny who's kidnapping infants and then, sacrificing it to this random-ass tree in the woods.
And I appreciated the low budget but still creative special effects that they used. So the special effect being that she raises a baby to the sky and then it's there 1 second and then he's gone. I mean, a little cheese, but you know what? Nobody hates cheese.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the aspect of the story that I really appreciated was just with the overall design of the tree. Because every
Mm-hmm.
time that there's a sacrifice being made, a human sacrifice, so that with the infants, basically the tree not only has its life sustained, but the baby essentially becomes part of the tree, and then you have all these carvings of all of
Of
the
baby
victims
The
faces.
baby
on the
faces.
And
tree,
a couple of adults.
it's yeah, it's so striking. Like
Yeah.
definitely like took me back a little bit. Not as much as like the third act when we actually see the tree action and chainsaws getting involved, but that's an entirely different case, which was an absolute riot in itself.
The natural enemy of the tree.
But
Chains.
yeah, I thought like the whole like fantasy approach to it was pretty interesting. But then you'd
Me
like
too.
tie in the supernatural, and like there's one point where the chick's like basically flying, and I just kept thinking of like The Simpsons when Mr. Burns is like an alien with the
Yeah.
green glow, you know?
I come in peace.
I thought it was pretty neat. I mean, like, I don't know what the word is. Let me think about it. I was tickled. I was tickled when I noticed that she had that very persistent sort of fairy tale medieval, like, well, not even medieval, but that very fairy tale British accent versus your more common British accents.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was pretty neat that you have this whole like group of people in like the barely the early 90s, and they're all like affluent and they're all just casual, but then you got somebody walking around like she's in a fairy tale. So I thought that was pretty neat because it kind of pulls you back into, and then by the end of the movie, you're completely immersed in a very mysterious fantasy world. So I thought that was really neat.
So of course the premise is that this young couple has a baby and they have to hire a nanny, and of course, so I have to call out the weird scene that took me a minute to understand what was happening because some of the editing in this movie is really wonky and weird.
I mean, he had a breakdown too.
But there's the part where they're picking the nannies and they're kind of talking about it, and then they say like, right, okay, first of all they cut to the scene where the couple are like, write down the name of what you want or something like that.
The nanny you want, yeah.
But the way they said it, I swear I thought they were coming up with names for the baby at first.
Yeah, I think I was in the same boat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I realized, they're saying to pick the nanny. And they say the name of the person who, like, it doesn't do a good job of, like, I don't know who that is when they say the name of the person. But then they immediately cut to the shot of her riding her bicycle and, like, falling off a cliff. Which also reminded me of The Simpsons when Homer falls down the cliff, and it's like, it's not like bad enough that he's falling like down the cliff, but he keeps like hitting stuff on the way down. Because it's like she goes over the cliff, they show her like tumbling down the cliff, and then she lands on a cactus at the very end. But
that was rough.
And that took me a minute because I was like, wait a minute, what is going on? And then I realized, she's the nanny that they picked. And
funky editing, you're right.
And the supernatural forces killed her so that they would pick the other nanny.
My brain had to do a couple of
it was like,
backflips to like, what? Oh wait, I get it. But,
the only thing missing from that scene was her going like, "This is even more painful than it looks." It's just like sprawled over the cactus. They needed it.
I also thought it was funny how when they were picking the nannies, they show like the first two nannies are these older women who are kind of stern, and they just immediately write them off. Even though in real life they would be the two like legit nannies.
You wouldn't. In a million years would I like hire a super hot nanny. I'm sorry.
Which exactly, that's the hilarious thing is it's like, of course, but it also the way that they immediately picked her after that girl died. It's like, well, I don't know why. I can see why the husband wants to hire her, but I think like the wife might be a little suspicious. But yeah, so that was really weird, and that was kind of like. They're bringing in the supernatural element and everything. And I definitely have a problem with the lack of lore in this movie because they introduce it in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They show the kid with the book, and the tree, the
the
pop-up
pop-up
book with the
book,
tree,
yeah.
which is actually really cool. Although they associate it with the two kids being left in the forest.
The Hansel and Gretel.
Hansel and Gretel,
yeah.
which this story doesn't feel like a
No,
Hansel and Gretel
there was
story.
no candy.
Although it does have this that kind of classic fairy tale kind of feel to it, but it didn't feel like a Hansel and Gretel story. But they had the tree, but they didn't do any lore, and they kept referencing. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they would say, like, the nanny would say, like, I have to wait for his blood to be right before I can, like, sacrifice him. But I was like, why? I don't know what. There's no lore as to why she's doing what she's doing, or
She just
what.
has to, John.
It's just they needed to sort of just explain why she's hanging out at the
That
house.
didn't bother me one bit.
Yeah. But I thought and I've said this in other podcasts, but this movie needed that scene where
Somebody pulls out
the
a
wife goes to the library and
book.
checks out the book.
Surprisingly well-stocked library.
But this is like a classic. She could get
Microfiche.
like a classic, like
Look at all the babies that have
but like a
disappeared.
Celtic mythology book,
Ooh.
and learn and get some information about how to defeat.
Maybe an old woman that has way too much information.
Yeah,
Which we kind of
the
get.
librarian.
That's
could
right.
be like-
Yeah, there we go.
But we kind of don't really get that. It feels like there's a lot of stuff. This movie felt like it was meant to be almost like a mystery where you would sort of think, oh, this is all good. And then you kind of realize slowly there's this weird stuff going on. But
almost like it was written by a producer and a director.
Mm,
You know.
and then so in the middle, it gets weird because another thing is I feel like they padded this movie out a bit. Oh, but we gotta before I get there. You mentioned the three.
Yeah, the big villain, the big scene that goes from being like a normal '90s thriller to like a fairy tale horror movie, which was amazing. So you get these ridiculously over the top, horrible dudes that bump into
just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, our woodland nymph and the baby are hanging out. Honestly, in the forest near the tree, I'm assuming. And these guys appear out of nowhere and just immediately want to kill the baby and rape the nanny. And I was glad, so they pull out a big knife. They're going to be doing stuff to her, and then she takes off running. And I loved how good she was at getting away from them. You see how fast she ran? That was insane. And she ran through clearly she should because she's a woodland nymph. So she should know the forest. She should know how to run through a stream, which she did beautifully.
And she's kind of tricking them in a way.
Yeah, so she takes them back to the tree, and then that's when we get to see the really awesome tree murder. But what's really cool was that, so she is trying to hide with the baby because she's still trying to protect the baby because the baby's the offering. And they pull her out of like this like hollowed out stump. And so the guy's like threatening, like he's going to rape her, he's going to do stuff to her. And then there's this other guy who was like, let's not forget the baby. So he's going to go fuck with the baby. Like, these guys are really evil.
And they're like 50s greasers.
I know!
Like
They're such bad
leather
hooligans. Yeah, with their really cool leather jackets. I bet that one guy was called Moose. And then one of them always wore 3D glasses.
One's called Vinny.
That's the little one always.
But, and then we get an awesome gore scene, which is really well done.
I was laying in bed watching the movie, and then I was getting a little bored, and I was reaching for my phone when the three guys came out, and then the big murder scene, and that was like, nope, leaving the phone down. This thing just got good. So when we were watching The Happening, I was so disappointed. And all I wanted was just, a tree to move and smack somebody. And you really get a lot of that in this one.
I love I think my favorite in that part is when the tree basically thwacks that guy's head.
His head
like
explodes.
It winds up and does like a whack. Yeah, his head just bursts into a blood spray. Good. That was great. And then we get basically like an Evil Dead style dragging the guy around, and then it reminded me of The Happening, where the guy's leg just comes off when it's pulling him. It's like, okay, like
It's the horror movies for you. They just come right off. Like Legos.
it's like, I think in horror movies, people are made out of Play-Doh, basically, and you can just pull people's limbs off or like stick your hand into someone and like but his leg gets pulled off and then that root shoots up out of the ground and
pretty good accuracy.
Impales him.
And then later you find out it was that kind of a happy coincidence that the root was able to impale him because he's not so accurate in other attempts.
And it was funny too because, like you were saying, it's like a 90s thriller, and it's one of those kind of 90s like let's celebrate the yuppies kind of feel where it's like wealthier people in their fancy place.
That was a nice house.
Almost like like American Psycho kind of 80s yuppie style.
Nice houses make me so sad these days, especially this one.
But
I'll never have it.
It feels like that 100%. And then when we get that scene with the three guys, it suddenly just switches into a straight up horror movie. It's like the tone shift is pretty drastic.
It is, and it's again. I mean, like it's jarring, and it's not. They probably could have done a lot better, but I have to admit that I kind of enjoyed it because I was feeling kind of like I said before, I was feeling a little bored. So it was nice that they pulled it out. So I'm a little congested today, so I feel like my voice is really weird today. But anyways, back to the movie.
Yeah, so after that, they kind of like had that cool off period where they have like that dinner party.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's when we meet Ned, who is the neighbor, who eventually gets hunted down by the coyotes.
Yeah.
Later on in the movie.
Too.
But, I thought it was interesting because you have Ned here, who is, like, the neighbor, but he also, like, designed the house that this couple is living in. I was like, man, this guy's, like, pretty far off. But, of course, like, they have to tie in the whole, like, oh, man, I really want to hook up with the nanny. I mean, I wonder what she's doing. Let's take her out. So you're constantly, like, going after, the sex appeal. And, Holly said there's no candy for the Hansel and Gretel part, but that's because it was all eye candy.
That's right. That was,
and the whole time when we get to like the tree nymph part, and she's like just sprawled across the tree naked, and I'm just thinking like she's gonna get so many scratches on her body.
But that's her thing. She's a woodland nymph. She likes because it was all like those scraggly branches all over her body. But that was her thing.
And I'm just like throw a little mud on it, you'll be fine.
Which she does later.
That shot is really cool when it's the shot of the tree with her naked on the roots and like the wolves or coyotes walking around.
I did dig that a lot because again, you get a really big sense of like fantasy movie.
But I thought that scene was funny though with the guy Ned, where he gets hunted down because that felt like it was cool, but it felt like a filler scene because all of a sudden the main characters are all just gone.
Yeah.
And we get this almost like full 10-minute scene with this neighbor being hunted down.
Yeah, you're right.
It almost felt like we were it was like a short story contained in the movie, like.
There was no point to that.
It was definitely drawn out. I think in a movie that was more kind of put together and tightly done, that guy's murder scene would have been a couple of minutes long.
Yeah, and although it was kind of neat to see the wolves kind of come after somebody, and I don't know if you noticed, but there was this one scene where they're in the house and they're breaking through doors, and so he's leaning against the door to bar their entry, and they're knocking on or like pounding on the door, and it's breaking open, and then you just see one paw come through like. But it comes through like all vertical. I don't know. It was really funny.
Like a fake, like a stage hand with like a paw.
You're like, that paw didn't do that.
And I loved. I thought it was hilarious his scene where he's talking on the phone to the police or whatever.
Yeah,
that was hilarious because it's like this whole long monologue of him being like, there's wolves out here. No, I swear, there's really like wolves out here. They're trying to get me.
Like, did you call like just the police and not 911? Like, why are you having such a long conversation? Can you just help? You'll help and they'll come.
A lot of this movie, and things in that scene, and a lot of this movie felt like we were seeing like a first take. Mm. You know what I mean? Like they just ran the cameras, had the actors kind of.
Let's just have fun, guys.
Totally, and then that's what they used. Because like that dinner party scene also felt so kind of awkward and weird, and the dialogue and everything just felt strange.
And like that guy that I recognized from like Twin Peaks and other shit, like he was so rude. The other friend, he's like, "Well, what a hot nanny. What else does she do?" I'd be like, "I'm right fucking here. I'm the wife."
With the neighbor guy?
Well, no. When they were around the table and they were all just hanging out, and then like glasses.
Where was he from?
He was in Twin Peaks, and he's been in a bunch of other shit too.
Okay. Because the neighbor guy, if that's who we're talking about, the guy who got killed.
Not the neighbor guy with the glasses, but
the RoboCop guy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because the neighbor guy, I recognized him, but I couldn't place what I recognized him from.
Yeah, same.
But I think he might have been on one of those 1990s TV shows.
I have to blow my nose. I'll be back.
Okay. One thing I'll say about this movie real quick is that the 90s, this movie came out in 1990, and I swear to God, it feels like it transitioned from the 80s to the 90s with no transition. It was just like, this movie came out in 1990, and it looks 100% 1990s. It doesn't look like it's from the 80s.
That's a really good point.
It's almost like we just went from the 80s to the 90s with no looking back.
That's true.
I mean? But
I noticed that because it was very 90s, but then when I asked her, like, oh, what year did this come out? 1990. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Because usually, like, the first couple of years, things look like a previous decade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you going to say something to you? I thought you were about.
Oh, well, of course, like, after, like, the whole, like, Ned wanting to go after Camilla, you also have, like, Phil, trying to get his good night's sleep, and, of course, who's he dreaming about? Camilla.
Oh, yeah, yeah. They start having the dreams, like, that he's hooking up.
Yeah, the sex nightmare with Camilla.
Which felt kind of like, I don't know, I guess that was meant to be the supernatural stuff, but they should have just had them start having an inappropriate affair and not even have it be a dream. It should have just been actually happening.
Yeah, fuck it.
But
he keeps walking around without a shirt on, little six-packs hanging out.
I mean, because it definitely felt like they were going for that Fatal Attraction feel where he would become actually attracted to her.
Well, he was. I mean, they had a couple of, like, awkward, awkward scenes where they're like bump into each other in a hallway or in the kitchen, and I mean they weren't very pronounced, which they probably could have made them more pronounced that way to sort of heighten the tension of like, she's problematic. That would have been neat, and more boobs. Although we got okay amount of boobs.
So then what? So after the guy gets hunted down, then what happened? So. I don't want to jump too far.
Oh, there's the lady who lost her baby who's looking for her.
Which, that's another weird editing issue where, so there's the scene where the baby might be sick or there's something wrong.
Oh, is that when they get rid of the nanny? Or kicks her out?
He says to the nanny, like, we got to take the kid to the hospital because there's something wrong. And then it just cuts to him driving to that woman's house that we saw in the beginning of the movie, the first
mom, yeah.
And there's no explanation of how or why he goes to her house, but then remember he drives there and then
does she
has
call
a
him
conversation. Or anything? I don't remember.
She calls him, right? She leaves a message on his phone, on his answering machine. And
no, that's the guy.
No, Ned's the one who left a message. And that was after.
Okay.
And that's
basically he would. Yeah, he was, like, going out to, like, buy her flowers to, like, take her out, but, like, she walks everywhere. So he eventually spots her, like, walking into the forest, like, and she's, like he stumbles across her like bathing in the creek.
Right.
And then that's when, she's like sprawled up against the tree and you see all the coyotes and whatnot. But that's when the wolves like start to pursue him and follow him back to his house, and that's when he starts to leave like that rambling phone message to Phil and Kate, trying to be like, you don't let her back in the house, just warning them, but not really like specifying why, you know.
He doesn't. It's so weird because they use that voice message a couple of times to sort of be like, "Oh my God, this is so crazy! What happened?" But he doesn't say anything. He just says, he basically says something like, "Oh, Camilla, like I can't believe her" or something. But he doesn't say like she's
but what's
evil
he gonna
or
say?
she's whatever.
Like she bathes in the creek and she masturbated on a tree and she's got 3 really big dogs.
But it's just weird because there's no info for them to be like, oh, okay, we should he's saying this, so we should act on it. It's so vague that it's like, well, what are they gonna do with that info?
Yeah, it's not like, hey, she was hanging out with this tree that had a bunch of dead baby carvings on it,
Yeah, he
says like, she's gonna hurt your baby.
Right, he doesn't
she's
say
insane.
That.
Yeah, he should have said something. But he was very like tongue tied, even when he was on the phone with the cops.
Mm-hmm. And he says something like, "You gotta believe me," but he doesn't say.
You're like, we believe you.
I wonder if that was like an editing thing where maybe he had said, I saw her like in the forest or something, and they cut that out for whatever reason. But yeah, that was weird and vague. And then, I thought there was no reason why he went to the other woman's house, but he goes there and finds out, she's been kidnapping people. And, she's not who she says she is. And
I'm trying to remember why he ended up going there. Maybe it was 2 phone messages. Maybe?
It could have been. I might have missed it. But it felt...
I don't think so, because I know, like, Camilla was there...
Did she go to his house?
Listening, like, she was listening as Phil was, like, playing the message, but, like, she basically stopped him, and then, like, right after that is when he meets with Molly, who was, the mother of the first infant daughter who had been sacrificed to the tree.
Which also, I thought the wife was going to be, like, a character in the story, but she pretty much disappears.
You're right. She doesn't do much. She doesn't even come in with the whole, like, oh, I'm jealous of the babysitter, or I don't believe you, or I'm trying to bond with my baby. Like, nothing really until the very last part where she's finding Camilla. So, that's strange. There should be more Camillas. That's a cool name.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so he finds out she was sketchy. But it's like, they already know. I mean, it doesn't even matter at that point because they already know. But, and then what happens?
Let's see. So he comes back and the baby's still sick. And he tells Camilla she's got to go. And, like, I think he pushes her or he smacks her. I can't remember.
Yeah, they kind of get... They kind of fight, they're like grabbing the baby away from each other and stuff.
and so he kicks her out, and the baby has to go to the hospital because, he's getting pretty sick.
Which has a really weird, disturbing scene where the baby, when they bring the baby to the hospital, I swear that looks like the actual baby. It doesn't look like a fake baby. And when they put the baby on the table and they're like, oh, he's like not responding and stuff. And they show the baby is like unconscious and they like lift his head up and stuff. I was like, did they drug a real baby to film this scene? Because that's a real baby. It's unconscious. And they're like moving it around and it's not responding. And it's not.
I bet it was a fake baby. I mean, like, I can get you a fake baby tomorrow. You would think it was real. They make them. They make them really good these days. Yeah, fake babies.
Yeah. But no, and it was weird. That was a really weird scene.
A baby?
Give him some sedatives and like lay it on the table.
Look, we only gave him half a pill. It's totally cool. Says on the bottle I can give him 2. Children under 12.
It was the early 90s.
It was 19. It was
things were different.
The first year of the 90s. It's a different time.
So then that's where they start revealing the tree more, of course. Oh, but we get the awesome kind of climactic scene too, when
Where,
all this.
when Camilla goes to the hospital to try to steal the baby, or when?
Well, there's that, and they're kind of running around. It kind of turns chase scene, but then she goes to the forest with the baby, and the wife gets in the van, and then just like I thought there was going to be like a whole big confrontation at the end, but she just drives up and hits Camilla with the car and knocks her down, and that's the whole kind of big action.
But she doesn't stay down, which is the cool part.
But yeah, she gets back up and or she disappears, and they're like, "Oh my god!"
Leroy's like, "I hit her with my car.
What happened?" She was dead. We saw her. It's so funny because they edit the scene so it kind of cuts away. We don't really see, but it's just kind of like, okay, like I guess we'll have to take your word for it. I mean, presumably,
everybody knows if there's no body, there's no death.
Well, and also I would think they would have just grabbed the baby and taken off as soon as they like knocked her down and they got the baby and just leave, So it's like you don't really know what happened to her, like, and you kind of just knocked her down. But
and then after that, is this the scene where she comes back all covered in mud and she has the fight scene with mom while dad's fighting the tree?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the big climax, and I thought it delivered pretty well. So you got your girl fight, which. They're fighting over a baby, and I was actually talking to John about this before we started filming, where there's a scene where mom's trying to go up the stairs, and Camilla comes up behind her and is grabbing at her, and she makes her trip, and she drops that baby, and that baby hits the ground hard. Mm-hmm. And you're right, that does look like a real baby. And all I could think about was like, oh, you're gonna need a new baby. It was such a hard hit.
Yeah, definitely. And they kept like doing weird stuff where she would like grab the baby away, but then not just run away. She would stay in the immediate area. It's like you have the baby and she's not like
immediately on you need to go.
Yeah, like you should be leaving. Don't just hang out in the area around her waiting for her to do something.
Yeah. And then of course you have Dad with a chainsaw, which was pretty rad. But of course, the tree has all of its tricks, like wrapping itself around his legs and the popping out of the ground root trick.
Yeah, it does that again.
Yeah. What other tricks did it have? I feel like it didn't use its final trick, which is what it used on one of those three guys, which is like when it just comes down and eats your face.
Mm-hmm. It just kind of moves down. Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of the tree from Poltergeist. Also, the evil tree that tries to eat the kid.
Interesting.
But so I watched this movie in 2 parts, and in between I watched the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow movie, which has a haunted tree and has a scene where they cut open the tree and all the heads come out, like all the blood and heads come out of the tree. And I watched that, and then I watched the second half of this movie where then that happens, and I weirdly was like, wait, I started thinking that the scene from Sleepy Hollow was in the Guardian movie. I was like, wait, did the heads come out of there? No, that was in the other movie.
You spoke too much weed.
But it was a crazy coincidence because in this one, of course, he starts chainsawing the movie and human blood starts coming out of the tree and everything.
Baby blood.
Baby blood.
Yeah,
I mean, we can only assume it's baby blood at that, which makes it even better. But yeah, what I really enjoyed about that is just the fact that, one, like, the tree actually did bleed in the first place. I mean, it would kind of have to because it had so many blood sacrifices at that point in time. But it was also just the fact that, like, since Camilla was, like, so attached to the tree, like, they were basically one. So anytime a trunk or whatever or a limb would get cut off of the tree, Camilla would also lose a piece of her, and it would get severed from her body.
I like that, because that helped Mom get away, or helped Mom win the fight with a slightly damaged baby.
Yeah, they tried to kind of do the false ending where they tried to make you think like, oh, it's all over after they run her over and everything, and then they have that extra bit.
It's too quick, though. Yeah.
Where he just chops up the tree, and then and she's kind of turning into, you're seeing like her wood that she's sort of made out of wood, I guess. And it's getting damaged as he damages
It
the
was
tree.
a crazy movie in that at the end of it, I was thinking like, wait, yuppie's good, nature bad? And cut down the trees? So it was kind of a weird message in the movie.
I had to go back and rewatch the very beginning because it has a text beginning where it says,
Oh,
it has
that's
a
right,
little
yeah.
thing how it says, there were druids in the past and they worshipped trees, and some trees were good and some were evil or something. And so I thought that was funny in terms of lore, because it's like...
There's your lore, man.
It's just like, oh, like druids worship the trees. So that's the premise for this movie.
Blame the druids.
But yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's kind of the nature is evil story here, because...
Which you don't get very often, huh?
Because, yeah, it literally is. It's not like the, oh, you know, he's actually bad because he did this or that or whatever, and the tree was just defending itself, or like the whatever.
Straight up
like
baby eating tree.
Yeah, it's just literally she feeds the tree babies.
And the tree will send you a hot mama to steal your baby and sleep with you for no narrative reason.
And it's weird. I mean, I guess it's weird to nitpick this movie, but it's sort of the lack of lore again, where it's like, why? Like, okay, she sacrifices babies to the tree, but I mean, what does the tree do? The tree just sits there in the forest, and it doesn't do anything.
What does it do with all these babies? What kind of magic other than killing people? And I mean, and I also got the sense like that Camilla was the tree, not that she was like devotee
serving the tree,
right? Because I mean, like, what is they giving Camilla? Because yeah, she's hot, but it looks like she only comes out during the cycle, and then she goes back to sleep in the tree, and then she comes back again for the cycle to be nanny again. So it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of payback for Camilla if she's not the actual fucking tree. Right.
When the text in the beginning implies that she is like a tree worshiper, that she's like a druid. Okay. But really, she should be, in the thing I read, you know, like the Wikipedia, in their own description of the movie, I think they called her like a dryad or something like that.
Yes, they did.
Which is like a tree creature. But, in which she is, but really she should have been the tree. That was kind of muddled, because she kind of was the tree, because she obviously got damaged when the tree got damaged.
True.
But at the same time, she seemed to be serving the tree and worshiping the tree, I guess. But
this is a very confusing movie.
It wasn't totally clear. That's why we needed that lore to kind of tell us what's going on and how to defeat her.
And some microfiche action to get like the background about how many babies she's been doing this to.
Exactly. The picture of Camilla from like the 1800s.
That she looks the same?
She looks the same, and it's like the Old West town.
She's taking care of babies.
It's like, oh my God, that's her. She hasn't aged at all.
Or she died 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the other good one.
And at that point, she said like 200 different identities.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They needed to kind of spell that stuff out more, or have that in there at all.
I like how when Dad Ned, I guess, is meeting with the mom who had her baby taken, he's like trying to get her description. She's like, well, she's got brown hair. And I was like, why don't you start with like, well, she's incredibly beautiful and she's British and she's got a really creepy British accent. Like, not your normal, like, you know, EastEnders accent or anything. So I'm like, why don't you just go with the basics?
That scene was funny too, because she describes Camilla, and her description is accurate. Like, she says, like, blah, 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 and describes her, and it's like, yeah, that's her. But then she goes, and she had brown hair.
Oh, can't be her.
Goes, phew, she has blonde hair.
Wow, that was a close one.
Yeah, that was a close one. Okay, definitely not her, because nobody can dye their hair a different color.
Jesus.
But, yeah, no, that was a funny
That was
scene.
pretty hilarious. So, yeah, I was very surprised at how much I liked certain parts of the movie. Overall, it's not exactly a good movie. And I can see why it was pretty forgettable. But but yeah, I did enjoy the tree violence was very satisfying. Hadn't seen that satisfying of tree violence since Treevenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
don't think
Oh my
I've
God,
seen
babies always have it out for baby. I mean,
Yeah, I
trees have it out
mean,
for
those
babies.
those three stomped babies, you know. They didn't eat them.
That's true.
They just curb stomped them.
Mm. I swear, I think they, just to nitpick this movie too again, I think like when she mentions she has to wait for the baby's blood to be right before she can sacrifice the baby. I think that was an excuse to explain why she stays in the family and kind of does her kind of long con.
The long con.
Because really, like, if you're a supernatural creature in mythology, and there's mythological stories like this, you're just going to sneak in the middle of the night, steal the baby, and run off. You know what I mean? There isn't a strong reason to sort of become a member of the family and be there for a long time. You're just going to, like, sneak in the middle of the night, take the baby, and leave, and go feed it to the tree. You know? And so, I know it's a nitpick, but I just felt like it's part of the original story, the thriller only with no supernatural part, where it makes sense that she would do this kind of con and become a member, you know, work for the agency and move from place to place and change her name. Where if she's supernatural, she should just kind of be able to, like, disappear and, you know, do whatever she kind of wants on her own, you know?
Yeah, I just took it more as like she just enjoyed like the thrill of just mind fucking everyone that she comes across and like kind of like just like getting into their heads with all of these like sexual nightmares that people are having because of her. And obviously like she knows that she's gorgeous because like everyone is just fawning over her like the entire time in the movie. But it also seemed like too, like it didn't matter like who she came across. Like she was willing to like obviously kill others who were getting in her way, regardless of you know if they were adults or you know just babies.
It would be tougher to do this now in the modern era. You know, back then it was probably easier because she could just. There's no internet or anything, so.
Oh, you mean the reality of the story, not making the movie?
Okay. In terms of her going from place to place and like kidnapping kids and being able to hide out.
People's identity is more easily identified.
And they would have Googled, you know, they would have like done a background check, which they admit, the parents admit in this movie. What's crazy is that they
don't know who she is yet.
Well, they admit they didn't vet her. They basically, there's a scene like 3/4 into the movie where the husband is like, I just called the reference number for the last family we're for, and they never heard of you. And I just called this other number, and they've never heard of you. And it's like, you're supposed to do that before you hire her, not
after your baby's threatened.
Like,
he saw the photo and he's like, "Yep, that's the one."
That's
exactly.
the nanny.
No need to check her references at all. Just go ahead and.
Yeah, and the mom was like, "Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. Super hottie, and I just had a baby. Yeah, let's get her in here."
Yeah, and she really. She's in the mom is in the beginning of the story and the end of the story, and pretty much not in the middle. Of the story.
Yeah, she's missing a lot, and like there wasn't even any conflict between her and like her husband, which is really such a. I mean, it's fine, I guess, but it's such a normal space to fill up with additional story, right? So like it's just. It's like walking past a gallon of water when you're in the desert or something. You're like, I guess you're just. All right, let's keep going.
I kept thinking,
because like the mom's only problem in this movie was just the fact that like the baby like wasn't breastfeeding initially.
Yeah,
and like that was basically the extent of it.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, one of the rejected nannies, the older women, suggested the exact same thing that Camilla suggested in terms of the breastfeeding.
Which was, I forgot.
Which was because the mom couldn't breastfeed. And one of the older women was like, oh, but it's really important. that you breastfeed and you should try it. And she was like offended. The parents were like offended by that, and they were just like, ugh. But then when Camilla suggests the exact same thing later, they're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Camilla, we'll try that.
It's like, hey, you guys got mad when the other one suggested that.
I mean, I would assume that a person that looks that attractive can get away with saying whatever.
Oh, she was a lot closer to like their age too. You know,
Mm-hmm.
might have been a generational thing.
Yeah, but I kept the mom wife character. Her arc should have been that it's like the husband and the nanny are weird. There's like weird vibes between them, and something's going on, and so she should have been looking into the nanny behind secretly, like, I'm going to go investigate the nanny and find out what the deal is. And then she should have been the one who figures out that goes to the library and talks to the agency and is like, oh, maybe the nanny. Yeah. And then they could have a scene where she's like, the nanny's not what she says. And the husband's like, oh, but she's cool.
Rad. It would have been super rad. And, again, maybe like, because of the whole issue with the writer, that didn't happen. But I mean, there was a very easy, a good way to drive her crazy would have been like, new baby, I'm not sleeping. And that's the thing. Like, she looked great anyway. She's not sleeping. She's not able to breastfeed. She's not really bonding with her baby like she expected to. So she's got some like the post pregnancy depression. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, postpartum.
Thank you, postpartum depression. And on top of that, here comes the nanny. She's super hot. She's connecting hard with the baby. She's connecting hard with the husband.
Totally.
Driving the wife crazy. Like, that would have been a really good angle to sort of explore, but...
And
but who am I? Nobody.
Like, oh, the nanny's going to take my place.
And my baby.
Totally. It seems like I get the feeling that that's what the intent was for the story. That's probably what they were thinking initially. Yeah. But I guess when they started having to put in the supernatural stuff, that some of that stuff got rearranged and tossed out and whatever.
Yeah, who knows?
But
there was a lot of opportunities, but honestly, like the movie had more problems than just not this character development that we're coming up with right now.
Definitely, like the Hollywood kind of horror story of the studio meddling in the.
It's too bad, because I really enjoy movies about violent trees.
And it really shows you, too, that, like, you can have a good director, but if you don't have everything else, they're still going to make a bad movie.
Absolutely. You need absolutely everything else. There isn't that many... I didn't even catch it until you pointed out all the issues with the editing. But I know I've seen in other movies how... ridiculously important it is to have a good editor, and how easily you can throw away really good acting, really good production value, very good, absolutely everything if you have bad editing or bad audio editing, and it's just it can really mess with your movie.
Which there was bad audio in this movie too. This movie also did that thing where I think they overdubbed everybody for the whole movie.
Oh, really?
And it almost had that weird feeling of like a foreign movie that's been overdubbed. Kind of felt odd. But yeah, and the acting was weird in the movie too. There was a rough.
I like the actors. I mean, I didn't think they were bad. I mean, like I was saying, like I was surprised at how many faces I recognized. But I think like maybe with the weird scripts they were given.
Yeah.
They can only do so much.
Yeah, I'm sure it was like, with all the rewrites and everything going on, it must have been kind of crazy. And yeah, that's funny that this might have been a Sam Raimi movie. It's like the way the tree stuff happens some of it feels like it's right out of the Evil Dead movie. So it's weird. It's interesting to think that. I wonder if it was like a holdover from
when Sam Raimi was supposed to. Yeah, maybe. I think he would have made not to, compare directors too much, but it would have been really interesting to see Sam Raimi's take on it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it would have been a way more horror leaning than this sort of like thriller / horror thing they had going on in this one.
The movie he ended up making instead of this was Darkman, which is an infinitely better movie. You go. It's a pretty awesome movie. Now
I gotta go watch Darkman again.
Yeah, to watch that. And it's kind of crazy because it's a super early movie for Liam Neeson, one of his first starring roles, and what's her name from Fargo? You know, the main actress from Fargo.
I can't remember
her name. But it's like her first leading role too, and so it's kind of crazy because it has this really all-star cast, and it's really good. The acting is really good in it.
Hey, go check it out.
And an example where when you have a good director and everything, and things work out well, you can have a low-budget movie that is a really good movie. You know, it can still. Doesn't have to be wacky.
It doesn't have to be bad.
But it does, I mean, in terms of the plant theme, I mean, this is the most, maybe next to Audrey, who swallows people whole, this is maybe the most violent, because this thing, rips people's limbs off and
explodes heads,
knocks your head off.
Takes babies. It
eats
babies.
Which is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Like Chris Evans in the Train movie.
Snowpiercer. It always goes back to Snowpiercer.
Eating babies. Because similar to Chris Evans, the tree discovered that babies taste better than adults.
Oh my god.
So they more delicate.
That was a recording where you most just end up saying fucked up shit. I don't want to be a bad guy, but
eating babies. Maybe the most taboo of subjects for a horror movie.
It is true.
Baby violence. But
they just didn't show what actually happened.
And did they show? When the blood came out? Yeah, he didn't. They were careful not to show him chainsawing any baby faces on the tree.
Well, the baby faces were just carvings, right? When he cuts the tree, it's just blood that comes out.
Well, I thought the idea was that the baby faces sort of were the babies that it had eaten.
Well, no, for sure, but I didn't assume that if you cut that little part, you get baby. I thought it was
there might actually be a skull under there.
Yeah, I don't think that's the
idea.
idea that made me really uncomfortable for no reason.
Wasn't that the cop? Someone in the character was like, "Oh yeah," or one of the characters in the movie was like, "Oh, there were carvings on the tree that were." Am I mixing up Sleepy Hollow with this movie?
You might be mixing up Sleepy Hollow.
No, because that was when they were at the police station.
Yeah.
And he was talking to the detective, and he's like, "Well, we didn't find the body,
He was like, "Yeah, there were just carvings on the tree, and there were no." Yeah, they were kind of like, "What? There was no weird stuff going on here," which felt kind of just like, I don't know. That scene felt a little bit goofy, where it was just kind of like, "Oh, I mean, it's fine. I don't know, it's fine," but it felt really like they were just kind of like, we got to wrap this story up. Let's just kind of figure out a way to wrap everything up.
Nobody wants to be on this movie anymore. Let's just wrap it up.
It was that, or the cops were in on it too, and they're just trying to keep it quiet.
Yeah, that too, exactly. Because the way he was acting, it felt like he was trying to cover up something. Maybe Camilla got to him, and he was.
I would not be surprised.
That'd be the sequel.
So
you gotta keep it on the down low because you want your town to secure their spot as the safest town in the nation or whatever.
Guys, something just occurred to me. So we're in the good old U.S. of A., right?
This is in L.A. for sure.
And both the lore and the druids and Camilla and the tree are British.
Yeah. Maybe even really Irish, I feel like.
Did they bring over the tree, or did the tree respawn in the U.S.? Because it's magic and it doesn't care about borders and shit? I don't understand why there's British lore in L.A.
Yeah, no, this movie should have taken place in England.
Yeah.
Or in Europe somewhere, because, the lore and the fairy tale aspect is extremely European.
Not only that, but, there's not that many or any densely forested areas near
in LA.
And so a tree of that a tree that looks like that with the baby faces and that size. I feel like that would have been found fairly quick by teenagers,
And based on how we saw, like, the geography, those 3 guys, the thug guys,
they were just strolling around.
They were just hanging out and came across her, and she was right by the tree already. So,
she ran to the tree, I guess.
Yeah.
But even then, it was not more than like a 5-10 second run, right?
It was like 50 yards away
from an open clearing where you could have picnics with a baby and be found out by 3 dudes.
And it would all of a sudden, the movie, it was always kind of sunny summer weather.
Yeah.
But then whenever we saw the tree in the forest, it would be like dark and foggy and like European looking.
There were so many dangers for babies. I mean, like the tree and also Camilla, which is the tree, but then the 3, the tree hooligans, also dropping baby was a serious thing that happened as well. Like, holy moly, this is not a baby safe movie.
Definitely. And it's pretty crazy for.
I'm glad we watched it, guys. I'm glad it's over.
It's a good bad movie. It's like
it is. I mean, like it's such a weird mix of random shit, and it was really entertaining. I mean, it's crazy to think about who the director was. The many known faces that we saw, the weird background story that you mentioned about how the writer had a nervous breakdown and it was finished by overconfident producer and director combo. The weird, like, it was supposed to be Sam Raimi, so there's some really over-the-top horror stuff that doesn't quite meld with the story part. Like, it's nuts. For sure.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? The tone of those murder scenes with the tree feel like a Sam Raimi movie. All of a sudden, everything becomes really action-y and crazy. But then the other tone of the movie is really kind of like mellow, sort of that classic Hollywood thriller.
Fatal Attraction,
tone. Like, or like Basic Instinct, even.
Basic Instinct, there we go, yeah.
Like that kind of feel. Yeah, it's kind of funny. And that's where you can really see the director versus the studio, where it's like, I want to make a thriller, but we want
you to make a horror
movie.
You got horror on my thriller. You got thriller on my horror.
Exactly. It's just the clashing styles.
Oh man, yeah, that's crazy.
But it was good. Plant violence, tree violence.
I finally got my tree violence that I didn't get from The Happening or from Gaia even that much. Gaia was great though. I think Gaia was probably the best. I'm sorry, the best, the best movie we saw this month, and then followed by Little Shop because that was just like the nostalgia and also it's a really good movie. And then I guess followed by The Happening, and then followed by The Guardian. Incidentally, there's so many movies named The Guardian. And I was very happy I didn't have to pay $4 on Amazon to watch it. It was just free on YouTube. So.
Oh, that's the other funny thing, too, by the way, is that YouTube's algorithms are so hard. Their copyright stuff is so hardcore that any little copyright infringement is going to get tagged in some way by them and probably taken down. So a studio really doesn't care about a movie when somebody can just post an entire movie today in 2022, post an entire Hollywood movie and have it be up for months without so much as,
so they're like,
yeah,
this is getting watched.
Yeah, exactly. At least someone's watching it.
Get some of that ad revenue.
Oh, and I gotta also say, similar to Clowns at Midnight, the comment section for this movie is all positive. It's all people saying, I watched this movie as a kid and I loved this movie when I saw this.
Because of the boobs.
Yeah, it's like, it's really funny how with both of these movies, people saw this, I guess, on TV as a kid and were like, I liked it. Okay.
I guess.
Yeah. It must have been a rite of passage for all the boys, you know.
It must have been the movie where your parents don't realize there's going to be boobs because it looks like such a straightforward movie, and then little do they know there's boobs.
Yeah, which they did this is again one of those weird observations where, like, maybe I'm revealing more about myself by saying this than anything, but they really, like, the boob shots were shot that way where you could tell they probably weren't the actress's boobs, that they just got, like, another woman to do the boob shots, because they're all just shots of boobs without seeing her face or the
there
rest
was
of her.
that one where she's in the bathtub and the camera's kind of looking down on her, and so you get to see her boobs, but they're not like shown off. It's more like, "Hi, I'm taking a bath,"
It's
and you just
more
see a little bit of
tasteful.
boobage. It's more tasteful, is what it is.
But later we get those
Yeah,
straight
like the
up
sex
boob
scene,
shots
yeah.
where it's like the
Boobs.
camera is literally focusing right on the boobs.
If you don't see a face, it's for damn sure a body double.
Which maybe some executive was like, we need more boobs.
Oh yeah, they're always.
Like, just call up, just get a random actress in there.
Yeah, they're like, this
some
movie
boobs.
isn't great. We really need to add some boobs.
Mm-hmm.
They did that in another movie too. Oh, I think it was Clowns at Midnight, maybe, where they put that horrible sex scene in. That was clearly there just because they felt like they needed to get audience by having the sex scene, and it was like maybe the worst sex scene ever.
It's so weird to be turned off by a sex scene when like the actors are attractive, but the scenario is so bad that you're like, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sword fight, it didn't help.
Oh my god.
But yeah, unlike the Clown at Midnight, though, this does not have a cleaning montage. So it can't be credited as too much of a 90s movie.
That's true.
Yeah, true.
I hate cleaning montages so bad. So bad. I'd rather have a yard sale montage.
That's like,
Or a
cleaning montage is like TV sitcom.
Yeah, exactly.
level.
It's like, what the fuck am I watching? Is it Saved by the Bell? Fuck.
Saved by the Bell, exactly.
That's how I felt when I was watching The Mutilator last week, because I forgot about like the really corny like sitcom introduction, because it has like its own theme song basically, but then like the intro doesn't hit till like 18 minutes into the movie. And then you see them driving in the convertible with like the top down view, and you just have this really cheesy like pop intro playing.
Nice.
So you feel like you're watching like Full House, essentially.
Definitely.
But anyways, I think it's time that we wrap up for tonight. So just as a reminder, obviously October, November, we're doing new releases. A lot of good content coming out here in the weeks ahead, both in theaters, on streaming services, also on video on demand. So it should be a good time. We'll let you know what we're planning for next week once we watch a few trailers, because, you know, there's a few things that we have our eyes on, but we just got to, like, pinpoint what we want to hit first, and then we'll start to, you know, connect the dots at that point in time. But until then, of course, you can find all of our video content over on YouTube at Handle with Scare Pod. We're also on Twitter at Handle with Scare. If you want to join me in our 61 Days of Halloween streams, those have been happening on Stream Lounge basically every night at 9:15 p.m. Pacific time. So that's been a lot of fun, watching a ton of 80s cinema. For better or worse, we've had some great movies. We've also had some terrible movies, some of which were first-time watches, which doesn't happen all that often. But for now, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on Handle with Scare. And we'll see you guys back next week.